It was the autumn of 2015, and I was 23, living in a quiet little town called Ashwood in northern England. I'd been studying at Ashwood College for 2 years by then, renting a pricey, newly fixed-up flat on the nicer side of town with 2 mates from school. I'd gotten used to the place, its winding streets, the cozy pubs, and the hilly outskirts that stretched out beyond the busy center. To stay fit, I'd taken up running at night, sometimes with my flatmate but usually alone, heavy metal blasting through my earphones. I loved the solitude, the rhythm of my feet against the ground. On this night, the 10th of October, I think, it was chilly, the air sharp with that crisp autumn bite. Around 8 in the evening, I set out alone, heading toward the lonely edges of Ashwood. My route took me past a big, open park called Greenhaven, all rolling grass and a little pond, with a massive graveyard sitting right next door. That cemetery was something else, sprawling, ancient, with towering yew trees casting long shadows, weathered tombstones tilting in the dirt, and a crumbling crypt at its heart, tangled in ivy and decay. Beyond it, hidden by a rusted fence, were the ruins of an old hospital. Some said it used to be an asylum. I'd heard stories about guard dogs prowling those grounds, their growls echoing through the night, so I never got too close. As I jogged past Greenhaven and neared the graveyard's entrance, I noticed something odd. The gates, tall, black iron, twisted with age, stood at the end of a narrow, snaking path. And there, right in front of them, was a small figure. I slowed to a walk, squinting through the dim streetlight. It was a girl, maybe 9 or 10, standing alone. My stomach twisted a little, but I figured she might be with someone, a dog walker maybe. People pass through here sometimes. Still, the sight of her, so tiny against those looming gates, sent a shiver down my spine. As I got closer, she bolted toward me, her bare feet slapping the pavement. She looked terrified, eyes wide, face streaked with tears. She wore just a thin, pale dress, no coat, nothing to shield her from the cold. Her dark hair was a mess, tangled like she'd been running for ages. She grabbed at my arm, her voice shaking as she begged me to help her. She kept glancing back at the graveyard, into that endless black beyond the gates. It was so dark in there, like the night had swallowed it whole. No lights, no sound, just a void. I couldn't make out much of what she said, her words tumbling over each other, but the fear in her eyes was real. I fumbled for my phone, telling her I'd call the police. I dialed 999, put it on speaker, and held it up. But the second she heard the operator's voice, her face changed. The tears stopped. She glared at me, furious, and snapped that she didn't need the police. Her voice turned hard, almost commanding, like I'd betrayed her. I tried to calm her down, saying it was the safest thing, even offering to walk her to the station down the hill, about 20 minutes away. But before I could finish, she spun around and ran, straight back through those gates, into the pitch-black graveyard. I stood there frozen, watching her vanish. She didn't hesitate, didn't look back, just sprinted into the darkness until the night claimed her completely. The silence that followed was suffocating. No wind, no rustling leaves, nothing. Just me, alone on that empty street, my heart pounding in my chest. Questions raced through my mind. Who was she? Why was she out here, half-dressed and terrified? Why did she hate the idea of the police so much? And what, or who, was she running toward in that forsaken place? I didn't stick around to find out. I turned and bolted down the hill, my legs burning as I pushed myself faster than I ever had. The shadows seemed to stretch after me, clawing at my back. I didn't stop until I hit the bright lights of the town center, my breath ragged, my mind spinning. After that night, I never ran alone again. Something about that girl, her sudden rage, the way she melted into the dark, stayed with me, lurking in the corners of my thoughts like a ghost I couldn't shake. I wasn't anything special in high school. Just an average girl living in a gritty city like Cleveland or Pittsburgh, full of faded brick houses and constant noise. Horns blaring, sirens wailing. It wasn't glamorous, but it had its own rough charm. I didn't stand out. Too plain for the cool kids, too normal to get picked on. Most people probably wouldn't even remember my name now. My dad ran a junkyard on the edge of town, this sprawling mess of twisted metal and broken machines. He had an iron shredder there, a beast of a thing that could chew up old cars and spit them out in pieces. I'd watched it since I was 10, mesmerized by the way it mangled steel into jagged shards, the roar of it shaking the ground. Back then, all the girls at school were obsessed with this guy, Tony. He was a basketball star, tall, muscled, with this sharp mind that made him seem older than the rest of us. Everyone knew he had a messy home life, but he carried himself like it didn't touch him. One night during a football game, he came over to me. My heart nearly stopped. I couldn't believe it was real. He didn't say much, just asked where he could find me at halftime. We slipped away to his car, and he suggested grabbing food at McDonald's. It felt surreal, almost like a date, and I wasn't about to say no. We were driving when he pulled over suddenly, his face serious. He reached under his seat and pulled out a gun, a cold, black thing that made my stomach drop. I couldn't breathe. He looked at me, calm as anything, and said he needed me to get rid of it. My head spun, every rational thought drowned out by the sight of that weapon. I didn't want to be there, didn't want to touch it, but he was holding it, and saying no didn't feel like an option. My hands shook as I nodded, too scared to speak. He told me to text him later. Something casual like, "Nice seeing you at the game," once it was done. We went through the McDonald's drive-thru after that, but I couldn't eat. The gun sat heavy in my lap, hidden under my jacket. He dropped me off at my car in the school lot, and I drove home, my mind racing. I had to get rid of it. The junkyard was my only idea. I snuck the keys from the kitchen. My parents were upstairs, oblivious, and drove out to the yard, the gun burning a hole in my bag. The gate creaked as I opened it, and I flinched, imagining someone hearing me. What if the shredder jammed? What if I messed it up and got caught? The place was dark, the air thick with the smell of rust and oil, and every shadow felt like it was watching me. I stood there, staring at the shredder, its jagged teeth glinting in the moonlight. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I couldn't do it. Couldn't risk the noise, the evidence. Panic clawed at me, and I drove back to McDonald's instead, ordering a big meal I didn't want. I stuffed the gun into the bag with the fries and burger, my fingers greasy and shaking. Then I found a park half an hour away on my phone, drove there, and tossed the bag into a trash can. I sat on a bench after, my pulse hammering, waiting for someone to catch me. If anyone had asked what I was doing, I'd have begged them to call an ambulance. I felt sick with guilt, like it was eating me alive. Later, I learned the truth. Tony's sister had used that gun in a robbery that same night. She'd beaten an old store owner with it, left him bloody and dazed on the floor. No one died, thank God. But the violence of it, the thought that I'd held that thing, made my skin crawl. She got arrested, charged, and I lived in terror that someone would trace it back to me. I avoided Tony at school, kept my head down when the girls gushed about him. The rumors faded eventually, and life moved on. I still see him sometimes when I visit home, laughing with friends, acting like nothing happened. We never speak. That night haunts me, though. The weight of that gun, the secret I carried. It's a chill that never quite leaves. I was 13 or 14 when my family dragged me to a big fair in a rural part of England called the Stonefield Festival. My relatives used to be travelers, living on the road, but by then they'd settled into houses and left that life behind. I wasn't raised in that world, but they thought it'd be fun for us all to go. The festival was loud and chaotic, Tents, music, and crowds stretching across muddy fields. My cousin Lily, who was my age, and I got bored of sticking with the adults, so we wandered off to explore on our own. We ended up near the edge of the festival, where the noise faded and the trees thickened. A group of boys our age spotted us and waved us over. They seemed friendly enough, so we hung out, laughing and messing around. But as we drifted closer to the shadowy outskirts, one of them, a wiry kid with a sly grin, suddenly grabbed me. His arms locked around my waist, and he started dragging me toward a dense patch of bushes. My heart slammed against my ribs. I'm small, barely 5 feet, but I've always been scrappy. I twisted hard, drove my elbow into his face, and kicked at his legs with everything I had. He stumbled, cursing, and I broke free. The others just stood there, frozen, including Lily. Their wide eyes followed me as I bolted, my breath ragged in my throat. I didn't stop running until I was back in the crowd, the festival's lights and chatter swallowing me up. I don't know what that boy wanted, whether he meant to hurt me or pull some twisted prank tied to old traveler traditions. The thought of it still sends a shiver through me, even 10 years later. I can still feel the grip of his hands, the damp earth under my feet, and the suffocating what-ifs. I haven't been to a festival since, and I don't plan to. The memory of that shadowed edge lingers, waiting to creep back into my nightmares. I was 17, just shy of 18, when this happened. A year ago now. I'm autistic, and making friends in person has always been tough for me. So I leaned hard into apps to connect with people. I'm trans, female to male, and asexual, and I made sure to put that in my bio, along with stuff like my love for music and gaming. I lived in a quiet suburban town called Riverton, where nothing much ever happened. One day, I matched with a guy named Ethan, who lived an hour away. He seemed chill, into smoking and deep talks, and I was desperate for a friend to hang out with. Naive, sure, but I agreed to meet him. It was a crisp evening in late autumn, the 10th of November, when I waited outside my house. Ethan rolled up in a beat-up car, handed me a wine cooler, and we passed his vape back and forth. We clicked instantly, talking about life, dreams, and random stuff for hours. I felt this rush of connection, something rare for me. But as the night got colder and the high hit harder, I started stumbling, my vision blurry. I told him I needed to head inside. He walked me toward my window, and I thought that was it. Then he asked for a hug. I smiled, thinking it was sweet, and leaned in. The next thing I knew, a sharp edge pressed against my neck. My blood froze as I realized he had a knife. I tried to push him off, but my limbs felt heavy, useless. The blade nicked my thumb as I flailed, a sting of pain cutting through the haze. I stopped fighting, my mind screaming that I might end up a statistic, a body in a true crime podcast. He didn't say much, just muttered demands I couldn't fully hear over the pounding in my ears. I dropped hints for evidence, scraping my shoes against the gravel, smearing blood from my cut thumb on the wall, praying it'd save me if he didn't let go. Then I noticed scars on his thighs, peeking out from his shorts. Something desperate clicked in me. I forced my voice steady and said, "I see your scars. You're like me. You're hurting. But this won't fix it. It'll just hide the pain for a little while." I don't know how I stayed so calm, but it worked. His grip loosened, and he stepped back, eyes flickering with something I couldn't read. He told me to meet him again, and I nodded, lying to get away. The second he turned, I bolted inside, locked the door, and blocked him on everything. I kept his messages, though. Proof. Just in case I ever got brave enough to tell the police. I bandaged my thumb, the blood soaking through the cloth, and sat there shaking. What scared me most wasn't the knife. It was how real our talks had felt. We'd shared so much, connected over pain and quirks, and yet he'd flipped into this monster. I never saw him again, never reported it. The thought of him out there, maybe watching, still creeps into my quiet moments. My window faces the street, and sometimes I swear I feel eyes on me in the dark. I was living in a rough part of Hamburg, Germany, back when this happened, a few years ago, just before weed got legalized there. I smoked daily, a habit I'm not proud of, but it kept me steady. Usually I'd light up at home, safe in my cramped apartment, avoiding the sketchy streets outside. My neighborhood was a mix of flickering neon signs, rundown buildings, and tense vibes, mostly immigrants like me, struggling to fit in. Crime was common, but I'd always kept my head down. One night, around 3 a.m, I was online with friends, winding down. I wanted a joint and some TV to cap off the day, but I'd run out of snacks. The craving hit hard, so I decided to brave the cold and walk to a nearby corner shop, a grimy little place that stayed open late, probably illegally. I rolled a small joint, grabbed my coat, and lit up as I stepped into the freezing air. The streets were empty, the wind biting at my face. I felt good though, the high kicking in as I neared the shop, just one intersection away. Then I noticed them. A group of guys at the corner, older than me, watching as I passed. They didn't seem out of place at first. People loitered around here all the time. I crossed the street, not thinking much of it, until a voice called out behind me. "Routine ID check. Show me your identification." My stomach sank. I turned, expecting cops, but it was the same guys, closing in slow. They didn't look like police. No badges, just smug grins and dilated pupils. "Smoking weed's illegal, you know," one said, circling me like a vulture. I realized this wasn't a check. It was a shakedown. "Show us your pockets," the leader demanded. My mind raced. I had my phone, a few euros, and worst of all, 300 in cash from my weekly tips, still in my pocket from work. Losing that would ruin me for the month. I fumbled, pulling out some gum and broken earbuds, stalling. "Where's your wallet?" he growled, stepping closer. Then I saw it, a Glock tucked into his belt. Guns are rare here, illegal as hell, and my adrenaline spiked. I handed over the €5 note I'd meant for snacks, keeping my face blank, praying they wouldn't dig deeper. They weren't buying it. "You got no wallet?" the leader snapped. I panicked, remembering how some locals feared Russian gangs around here. In a thick accent, I stammered, "My friends have my wallet. They're coming soon. We meet here." Their English was shaky, and they hesitated, muttering to each other. I kept up the act, looking confused, hoping they'd back off. It worked. They decided waiting wasn't worth it. The leader pointed at my €5. "Get us something to drink then." I followed them into the shop, heart pounding, and paid for a 6-pack of soda. I braced for them to search me, but they just grabbed it and left. No fight, no fuss. I stood there, stunned, the shop's fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I'd bluffed my way out of a robbery, or worse, all for 300. The weight of it hit me later, alone in my apartment, the joint still smoldering in the ashtray. I don't walk around late anymore. The streets feel different now, like they're waiting to swallow me whole. I was a business student in 2022, living in Montreal, Canada, for a gap year to sharpen my English. The costs were steep, so I shared a 3-bedroom apartment with other students in a gray brick building near the city center. My roommate, Lucas, was a giant Swiss guy, nearly 2 meters tall, over 100 kilos, but warm and easygoing. We hit it off fast. A few weeks in, he planned a road trip through Quebec's forests, leaving early on a Saturday, the 5th of March. I stayed behind because a new tenant was due to arrive that afternoon around 3. The hours ticked by. 3, 4, 8, 10, and no one showed. I ate a sandwich, watched some TV, and gave up waiting by midnight. I'd just drifted off when a loud knock jolted me awake. Footsteps shuffled in the hall, and a soft voice mumbled about the apartment's layout. Groggy, I figured it was the newbie and stayed in bed. Minutes later, Knocks came at my bedroom door. Once, then again 10 minutes later. Annoyed, I dragged myself up. A young woman, maybe 25, stood there, her dark hair framing a pale face. We swapped quick hellos, shared Instagram handles, and I stumbled back to sleep. She seemed normal at first. I'd help her navigate the buses and subways, pointing out stops and shops. But then things got weird. Every night when I got home, she'd text me or linger in the common areas, finding excuses to talk. The air felt heavier each time. One evening, sprawled on my bed, I caught her on the shared balcony outside my window, pressed against the railing, staring at me. Her eyes were sharp, unblinking. When she saw me notice, she darted back to her room. I brushed it off, but unease gnawed at me. It kept happening. Night after night, I'd glance out and find her there, watching me sleep, or trying to. Her gaze pierced the dark, and she'd vanish the second I looked back. The night before I left for a trip, it got worse. I had an early appointment, so I was up at 5:30 on the 12th of March. The apartment was silent, shadows pooling in the corners, except for a faint light under the bathroom door. Brushing my teeth, I heard soft steps behind me. She slipped out of her room, barefoot on the creaky floor, and opened the bathroom door. She sat on the closed toilet, staring at me, blank, motionless. My reflection in the mirror looked as trapped as I felt. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating until I bolted out, shutting the door behind me. That night, eating alone in my room, I saw her again through the window, those same piercing eyes. I looked away, hoping she'd leave. At 3 a.m, a nightmare snapped me awake. I turned, and there she was, still on the balcony, her wide eyes locked on mine. This time she didn't move, just stood like a statue, her silhouette stark against the city lights. Then she spun and ran inside. My pulse raced as I lunged for the lock. Moments later, the doorknob rattled, softly at first, then harder. I held my breath, frozen, until it stopped. By morning, she was gone, and I left for France that day. I never saw her again. I still wonder what she wanted. Maybe my size, taller and broader than most, fascinated her. Or maybe it was something darker. The memory of her unblinking stare clings to me, a shadow that won't fade. I come from a big, tight-knit family, and back in high school, my aunt was dating this flashy guy named Victor. He drove a sleek car and wore expensive watches, but no one knew how he made his money. I had a hunch, though, something shady. I was 17, living in a town called Fairview, where drugs floated around like gossip, and I asked my aunt to hook me up with a job through him. Victor agreed, and soon I was selling to kids I knew, guys who bragged about using already. Their orders got bigger, and I didn't ask questions. I was pulling in $3,000 a month, not a fortune, but more than most teens saw. I kept it quiet, stashing the cash in an old shoebox under my bed, hoping no one noticed. One Saturday morning, the 10th of May, I walked to a friend's place for a low-key birthday breakfast. Just pancakes and coffee, nothing wild. On my way back, cutting through a quiet street lined with peeling row houses, a car pulled up beside me. A guy stepped out, older, well-dressed with a stern face. I thought he was a cop at first, and my stomach dropped, picturing handcuffs and jail. But then he flashed a switchblade, its edge glinting in the sunlight. "Don't act dumb, girl. I know you have money. Hand over your purse and we'll make this easy," he said, his voice calm but sharp. I froze. My body locked up. Not quite fear, more like it didn't know what to do. The blade hovered inches from me, and my mind blanked. But something about his words, "It's okay, we can make this easy," weirdly steadied me. I managed to croak, "Can I just give you the cash? My purse has my phone and pictures." He nodded, watching closely as I opened my bag and pulled out 200 in crumpled bills, left over from a deal. He snatched it, leaned in, and hissed, "If you tell anyone, I'll find out." Then he was gone, tires squealing as he peeled away. I walked home in a daze, the street eerily still. It didn't hit me until the next morning, shaking, crying, the reality crashing down. I'd been mugged. His words echoed, "I know you have money." Did he know about the dealing, or was it a lucky guess? Either way, that scare jolted me awake. I told Victor I was out, too freaked to keep going. He shrugged and took my customers off my hands. That was nearly 10 years ago, and I've never looked back. I still see that guy's face sometimes, the blades glint, and it chills me. But in a twisted way, he saved me from sinking deeper into that life. Fairview streets haven't changed, but I have. I wasn't there for this one. It happened to my dad a few years back, in 2021. I'd moved away from my hometown of Willow Creek, Virginia, over a decade ago. But he still lives there, in the same house where I grew up. It's a small place, just south of Richmond, not big or busy, but cozy in its own way. Dad's 67 now, a gentle guy everyone knows, always walking his scruffy dog, Rusty, down to my old bus stop each morning. The kids and parents there loved him. Rusty too, with his wagging tail and eager eyes. He'd told me about this blonde-haired teenager he'd see on those walks, a lanky kid with a backpack, maybe 16 or 17. They'd cross paths often enough that it became routine. I picture it clear as day. Dad nodding hello, Rusty sniffing around, the kid kneeling to pet him for a minute before they'd part ways. Nothing about it seemed off. Our neighborhood was quiet, the kind of place where nothing big ever happened. I didn't think twice when he mentioned it over the phone. Then, a few weeks passed, and Dad noticed the kid wasn't around anymore. He didn't dwell on it until one morning, the 15th of February, when a neighbor stopped him mid-walk. "Haven't seen that boy lately, have you?" the neighbor asked. Dad shook his head, curious. That is when the story spilled out. The kid had been arrested, him and 2 others, for murdering a 20-year-old named Tyler Dawson. They'd hacked up his body and dumped it in the woods near Willow Creek. I couldn't speak when Dad told me. My safe little hometown, with its tree-lined streets and familiar faces, had turned into something sinister. The details came later, pieced together from news I dug up online. On the 1st of February, the sheriff's office found Tyler's remains off a back road, Pike Lane, near the old mill. The kid Dad knew, along with his buddies, faced over 20 charges each. Murder, mob violence, defiling a corpse. They're locked up now, but the mugshots I saw online, those cold, hollow eyes, still haunt me. Dad had been chatting with a killer, petting Rusty like it was nothing, all while that boy hid something so brutal. I've been meaning to visit, to walk those streets again, but the thought of it sits heavy in my gut, like a shadow I can't shake. I'd just moved to Arizona with my dad a week earlier, back in late March of this year. We were still hunting for an apartment, so we'd been crashing at rest areas off Interstate 19, him in the driver's seat, me curled up in the back. It had been just us for nearly 10 years, and we'd never felt unsafe. Not like this. On the 7th night, around 7 in the evening, we headed to the rest stop like usual, ready to unwind. The freeway stretched out dark and endless, headlights cutting through the desert dust. I didn't know then that this night would turn my stomach inside out. We took an exit to switch sides of the highway, the car humming along. As we looped back toward the on-ramp, I spotted a truck idling in the distance, its lights glowing like eyes. I didn't think much of it. Trucks were common out here, until it started tailing us. My dad noticed too, his grip tightening on the wheel. The headlights grew brighter, closer, pinning us in their glare. He pulled over to the left shoulder, flicking on the hazard lights, hoping the driver would pass. Instead, the truck stopped on the right side, blocking traffic. Horns blared as cars swerved around it. The driver's door swung open, and a figure stepped out, too far to see clearly, but moving with purpose. My dad didn't wait. He floored it, tires screeching as we shot forward. The truck roared after us, its engine a low growl in the night. I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hit the numbers. The call took forever to connect, over a minute of dead air while Dad pushed the car past 100 miles an hour down twisting side roads. The truck stayed on us, its lights a relentless ghost in the rear view. When the operator finally picked up, I blurted out that we were being chased by a dark pickup with blinding headlights. Dad killed our lights, plunging us into darkness, weaving through corners like a madman. I clung to the seat, the world a blur outside. The truck's beams started to fade, and after one last sharp turn, we lost it. Dad kept driving, 5 more miles, before pulling off at an exit. We rolled into a Walmart lot, the neon sign a shaky beacon, and sat there for an hour as the operator told us to wait. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe right. Maybe that driver just wanted to warn us about something. A busted taillight, who knows? But out there, alone in the dark, it didn't feel like that. It felt like he wanted us gone, off the road, out of sight. We're safer now, settled in a tiny place. But I still scan every truck that passes, waiting for those headlights to find me again. I was 17, a junior in high school, when I met Javier during choir class back in my hometown of Easton, a small city with more strip malls than charm. He'd just moved there from Honduras, and we bonded over our love for singing. One day, on a choir trip, I worked up the nerve to sit next to him on the bus. He was all smiles, chatting me up for 3 hours straight. By the end, he handed me a little origami crane with his number scribbled inside. My heart did flips. I was hooked. For 10 days, we texted nonstop, ate lunch in the library, sat together in every class. It felt like something real. But there were warning signs I ignored. Whenever I asked him to hang out outside school, movies, a family barbecue, anything, he'd shut it down with a flat nope, no reason given. Then he'd ask me stuff, like what I was doing that day, but cut me off before I could answer, firing off weirdly personal questions instead. "How many guys have you dated?" he'd demand mid-sentence. It threw me off, but I brushed it aside, thinking I was overreacting. On the 10th day, I was walking my dog along Easton's quiet streets when my phone buzzed. Javier texted, "I had a dream about you. Want to hear it?" I grinned, curious, until the messages kept coming. They were twisted, detailed fantasies about my body, stuff no one should ever say. He wanted secret meetups, photos I'd never take, things that made my skin crawl. I typed back, "No, lose my number, don't talk to me again," and blocked him everywhere. My friend checked his Snapchat. He was posting explicit pics of girls who looked like me, same build, same hair. He kept it up for 2 months until he graduated and bragged about moving to Oregon. I thought that was it. But summer turned into a nightmare. Random numbers started texting me. "You look good in that blue top. Nice choice at the cafe." I'd be out with friends, at the fair, grabbing food, and those messages would hit, proving he was watching. I never saw him, though. His Instagram showed a shiny new life in Oregon. Job, house, no face in the pics. I deleted my accounts, changed my number, and when I graduated, my family moved to a new town. He tracked me for 3 more years. Burner phones, fake emails, even stalking my friends online. Then, one day, it stopped. No clue why. I'm married now, happy, with a solid job, but that mess still creeps back every few years. I'll lie awake, replaying his voice, those texts, wondering if he's out there, waiting. Easton feels like a ghost town in my memory, haunted by his shadow. I was 13 when this happened, living in a coastal town called Seabridge, right on the edge of the ocean. A kilometer or so down the beach from my house, there was this spot where the tide left behind a shallow lagoon. perfect for me and my friends to mess around in. 2 dirt roads ran alongside it, cutting through the dunes. My mom used to kick me out every weekend with my German Shepherd, Max, to burn off energy. I never minded. I loved those walks. That day, the sun was blazing, so instead of the beach, I took the cliff path above, a shady trail through thick forest overlooking the water. I'd done it 100 times, Max bounding ahead off leash, no worries in the world. But as I walked, I heard something. Soft, muffled steps crunching the dry leaves behind me. Max was too far up to notice, and the forest was too thick to see through. My gut twisted. No one could move that quiet on this ground unless they were trying. I picked up my pace, then broke into a run, aiming for the lagoon's open space. The steps got louder, faster, chasing me. I burst out of the trees, heart slamming, and spotted my friend Sarah by the water, Max already splashing around. I caught my breath, trying to act normal, when a tall, skinny guy, nearly 2 meters high, came strolling out of the woods toward us. He smiled, friendly-like, and started chatting. We were polite back, not knowing better. He asked where we lived, if anyone else was around. Innocent stuff at first. But his questions kept coming, and his eyes didn't match his grin. Sarah and I exchanged looks, mumbled about meeting friends, and moved down the lagoon. We sat for a bit, shaking it off, until Max started growling, low and mean, which he never did. I turned, and there he was, 50 meters back, just standing there, watching. We shifted again, but he followed, closer this time. My stomach knotted up. We were alone out here, no one else in sight. Sarah called her mom, who was an hour away. Max went wild, straining at the leash I'd clipped on, teeth bared at the guy. Every time we glanced back, he'd flash that creepy smile like we were old pals. He kept closing in, step by step, until Sarah's mom pulled up on the dirt road, 200 meters off. He was between us and the car. Her mom saw him, sprinted over, and he froze, distracted. We bolted past him, Max barking like a lunatic, and didn't stop until we piled into the car. He lost it then, hurling rocks at the windows, screaming nonsense as we locked the doors. Sarah's mom dialed emergency services, and we waited, hearts pounding, until the police showed. He'd already vanished into the woods by the time they searched. They never found him. I still avoid that forest. The thought of him lurking there, waiting, chills me to the bone. Sarah being there saved me. I had no phone, no way out. Alone, I don't think Max and I would have made it. I'd just turned 18 when I moved to a tiny rural town called Pine Hollow, California, in August of 2020. I was staying with my aunt and uncle, and my best friend Mia, 17 then, lived nearby. The place was so small you could drive across it in 5 minutes, a fact that'd matter more than I knew. We'd hang out at this so-called park, a grassy clearing with a few benches, hemmed in by woods and a dirt trail along a riverbank. I'd go there alone sometimes, smoking or sitting by the water, never noticing anything off, despite warnings about creeps who hassled girls. One afternoon, Mia and I were at the park, smoking and chatting, the air thick with late summer heat. We decided to wander the trail, taking in the trees and the river's quiet rush. 5 minutes in, I felt it, a prickling on my neck, like someone's eyes were boring into me. I glanced back and saw a man, dark hair, middle-aged, trailing us, maybe 50 feet behind. The path hugged a gated community's wall, so people walked it all the time. I told Mia, but she shrugged it off, saying I was paranoid. She wasn't wrong. I overthink things, but something about him felt wrong. We kept going, and I'd peek back every few steps. His pace picked up, calm strides turning into a brisk walk. My pulse climbed. I turned fully, walking backward, staring him down to let him know I saw him. He veered toward the brush, like he was heading for the river, and I felt dumb for worrying. I faced forward, relieved, until I looked again. He was sprinting, full on charging at us from the trail's edge. My blood ran cold. I grabbed Mia's sleeve, yanked my pocket knife out, and we ran, legs pumping as his footsteps pounded closer. I'd never gone far down that trail, didn't know where it led. He was blocking the way back, gaining ground. I called my uncle mid-sprint, gasping that we were being chased at the park. He told me to stay on the line and make noise. I let out a scream that tore my throat raw, echoing through the trees. The trail ended at a rusty fence near an abandoned shed, the gated community's wall looming nearby. I shoved Mia toward it, boosting her up with a tree's help. I tossed my knife and phone over, scrambled after her, and landed hard on manicured grass, startling a guy walking his dog. We must have looked wild, 2 teens, panting, me clutching a knife, but he rushed over, asking if we were okay. Mia explained while I told my uncle we'd made it inside the community. A minute later, his voice boomed from the trail, yelling threats, promising he was armed. The dog walker led us to an access gate, and we met my uncle there. He'd sped his car through the park, gun ready, but the guy was gone. I spilled the whole story once the panic eased, and we drove home, my uncle's pistol glinting in his lap. I haven't been back since. For months I'd jump at every shadow, convinced that man was still out there, watching. I just dropped out of high school and left my parents' house, desperate for money to pay rent. I'd have taken any job back then, so when the cemetery in my little town of Willow Creek needed workers, I signed up fast. Lucky or not, it's hard to say. The old-timers, guys who'd been digging graves there for 20 or 30 years, couldn't figure out why someone my age would want that kind of work. It was tough. My lower back ached for weeks, but I got used to it. Honestly, it felt more like a free gym pass than a job. I got strong quick, and unless the weather turned nasty or a funeral was happening, I didn't mind it. Being outside all day was kind of peaceful. The cemetery was straightforward. Most of it was just rows of basic graves, all the same size and price. But up in the northwest corner, there was this private area. Bigger plots for rich folks. They had fancy setups like mausoleums and angel statues, stuff the local undertaker made a fortune selling. I didn't go there much. The older guys handled the upkeep, not trusting me with the chemicals that kept the marble and brass gleaming. So when my boss called me on my day off, voice shaking with anger, asking if I'd been messing around up there, I was caught off guard. I swore I hadn't been near it since training months back, when I watched one of the veterans use the marble cleaner. He let out a confused grunt and told me we'd sort it out when I came in next. My gut churned, but I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. A couple of days later, I showed up for my shift, and the air felt heavy, like something bad had happened. My boss didn't say a word as he marched me out to the northwest plots. Another worker was already there, hovering over a grave. My boss turned to me, his eyes sharp, and asked if I'd been sneaking up there on my lunch breaks, maybe munching snacks among the fancy stones. I told him no way. I'd been drilled never to eat near the graves. Crumbs draw animals that tear up the plots. That's when he laid it out. Something had clawed into a fresh grave up there. Not a person with a shovel. The dirt was scratched up, jagged, marked by claws. It was a disaster, not just for sanitation, but for the families. If word got out that wild animals were digging up their dead, there'd be hell to pay. We had to fix it fast. We gathered that day, all us grave diggers, and figured it was happening at night. Some scavenger, maybe a coyote or a bear, even a stray dog. The plan was simple, night watchman. And guess who got roped into the first week? Me, the young one, the new guy. The double pay was the only thing that made it bearable. I needed that cash. My first night sucked. I sat alone in the dark with just a flask of strong coffee and a pellet gun one of the guys lent me to scare off critters. It was long, boring, and the silence pressed in like a weight. But I shifted my sleep around, and it got easier. Then, on the second to last night, I was walking toward the northwest corner, flashlight in hand. I stopped dead when I saw it, something moving fast, limbs thrashing as it ripped at the soil. I could have shouted or fired a shot to spook it, but part of me thought if I took it down, I'd lose the extra pay and get my days back. So I crept closer, switching off the light, moving quiet like I'd learned hunting rabbits with my uncle. I'd hit it with the beam at the last second, freeze it, and take the shot. But when I flicked that light on, my heart nearly stopped. It wasn't an animal. It was a person, crouched low, digging with their bare hands. I couldn't lift the gun, couldn't think, just stared, frozen. Then I started yelling, telling them to get out, saying I'd call the cops. They didn't run scared. They turned, and their eyes blazed with fury, like I'd ruined something important. If I hadn't had that rifle, I swear they'd have lunged at me. They took off into the trees, swallowed by the dark. The others didn't believe me. Some said I'd seen something, sure, but not a person. The police found boot prints, but nothing else. No trail, no answers. I know what I saw, and it stuck with me, a shadow that won't fade. I was 16 when I took a summer job at a cemetery in rural Tennessee, a place called Oak Hollow. It was simple work, scrubbing dirt and grime off tombstones, keeping the grounds neat. The pay wasn't much, but I didn't mind. The cemetery felt cut off from everything, surrounded by thick, dark forests that swallowed sound. There was one building with bathrooms for us 5 caretakers, and a small mausoleum for the richer families. Beyond that, it was just flat earth littered with graves. I'd always been jumpy there, probably because I watched too many horror movies. The quiet had a way of creeping into my bones, making every shadow feel alive. One evening, I was on my rounds, heading to the mausoleum to check it over. The sun was dipping low, casting long, twisted shadows across the stones. As I got closer, something felt wrong. My skin prickled, like I wasn't alone. I brushed it off at first, but then I saw it. Faint candlelight flickering from inside the mausoleum's cracked stone walls. I slowed down, straining to listen, and I swear I heard voices. Young ones, kids my age, laughing in a way that didn't feel right. It wasn't friendly. It was sharp, mocking. I hadn't seen a soul come or go all day, and the idea of facing a pack of teens in there alone made my stomach drop. I wasn't brave enough for that. So I called Jim, the security guy, an old retired cop, tough as hell, always itching for action. He'd back me up. When Jim got there, we stepped inside together, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. The place was empty. No kids, no voices, just silence, and those candles still burning, their wax dripping onto the stone floor. They circled an open tomb, and inside was a tiny skeleton, a child's, its bony hand clutching a rotted knitted doll. That doll's stitched smile stared up at me, uneven and wrong, like it was mocking us. Nothing else was touched, just the tomb and that creepy little thing. My heart pounded as we backed out, the air feeling thicker than it should. We swept the grounds fast, looking for whoever did it, but there was no one, just the wind rustling the trees. I kept picturing those kids slipping away, laughing at us from the shadows. After about 15 minutes, we went back to seal the tomb, sliding the heavy stone lid back into place. I was shaking, but I followed Jim inside. That's when I saw it. The doll wasn't with the skeleton anymore. It was sitting upright across the room, propped against the wall, that same twisted grin fixed on us. Someone had moved it while we were gone, playing with us like it was a sick game. My blood turned to ice. I couldn't breathe right. I quit the next day, told them I was done, and I never went back. Not even to see the place again. Whatever was in there, I didn't want to know. I was still in middle school when my dad bought a cemetery in our quiet town of Pine Hollow. By high school, I was working there full-time, mowing the grass, pulling weeds, tending flower beds. It was steady cash, and most days it felt peaceful. Sure, I'd catch a shadow flickering at the edge of my vision, or hear a rustle that didn't match the wind, but I shrugged it off. The real unease came when we had to deal with the crypts. I'd dig down 5 or 6 feet to these massive stone doors, pry them open, and drop into a cold, dark hole. Some rooms held 2 big coffins, others 4 small ones for kids, or shelves packed with urns from way back. Families in the 50s and 60s bought these crypts to stash generations of ashes. Some sealed them up tight, but others left stuff. Melted candles, faded photos, wilted flowers. Opening one after 50 years felt like cracking into a time capsule of death, the air heavy with dust and decay. One summer, my best friend Tom and I were groundskeepers, making easy money at $5 an hour. We'd tear around in a souped-up golf cart, tools rattling in the back, clearing out dead flowers, empty liquor bottles, and sometimes worse, soggy stuffed animals on kids' graves or used condoms tossed in the bushes. Throwing that stuff away hit me harder than the digging ever did. It felt wrong, like I was tossing out pieces of someone's grief. Rain made the job a slog, but otherwise it was a breeze. Then one early morning, we found this baby doll on a grave, burned black, like someone had torched it with a flamethrower. Big iron nails were driven into its eye sockets, rusty and bent. We figured it was college kids pulling a prank. But out there alone, with the mist hanging low, it set my nerves on edge. The worst came later. One foggy Saturday, I was walking the grounds when I saw her. A girl my age, naked, laid out neat on the grass, arms by her sides. Her skin was pale, bruised, her neck purple from strangling. Someone had bashed her head in, blood matting her hair. My legs locked up. I couldn't move, just stared until Tom found me and called the cops. They ID'd her fast, a student from a nearby school. But her clothes were gone, and her killer was never caught. The police grilled us twice, thinking we might have done it. That scared me more than the body, being tied to something so awful. We had alibis, so they dropped it. But I still see her sometimes when I close my eyes, wondering if she's found peace. I'm Sarah, 20 years old, from a small town in Virginia. Last November, on the 101st anniversary of the Great War's end, my history class at Penn State flew to France to visit American war graves. I'd never been out of the country much, just a quick trip to see a cousin in Toronto, so I was buzzing with excitement. I even taught myself some basic French online, practicing phrases like, "Where's the bakery?" until I could say them without stumbling. Every word I nailed made me more eager to go. But when we landed, it wasn't the dreamy France I'd imagined. The weather was dismal, cold, wet, gray, and some of the locals were outright rude. They'd correct my shaky French or pretend they didn't understand, even when I knew I'd gotten it half right. Still, there were nice ones too, and I reminded myself why I was there. To walk through history, not just read about it. We ended up in a quiet little town called Bellevue, at a war cemetery for American soldiers. Over 6,000 of them lay under rows of white crosses, stretching out beneath a sky heavy with iron-gray clouds. I wandered among them, feeling the weight of all those lives cut short. Then I spotted him, a man in an old Second World War uniform, standing alone in a patch of neatly trimmed grass. No crosses marked the spot, just tiny white plaques half buried in the dirt. I checked the map on the notice board, the guidebook, even the website later. Nothing mentioned this place, labeled Plot E. It was like it didn't exist. As I got closer, I counted 96 of those markers, each with just a number, no name, no hometown. No flags flew, no stars and stripes, just silence and neglect. The man noticed me approaching and spoke, his voice low, carrying a bitter edge. "Buried with their backs to the others," he said. "The dishonorable dead." I froze, confused, and he went on. These were U.S. soldiers executed for crimes, assault, murder, stripped of honor before they died. I pointed to the marker at his feet, asking who it was. His gray eyes flickered with something heavy, "A Pennsylvania guy, Georgie Klein," he said. "Caught poaching on some English lord's estate. They fought, and he shot the man in the head." He nodded toward others nearby. "Those two, Corporal Dane and Private Holt, strangled a 15-year-old girl in England. And over there, Lewis Tate, hanged for killing an Italian woman. Father of Emmett Tate, the kid lynched back home years later." My stomach twisted hard. I knew Emmett's story, his mom's open casket, showing the world what hate did to her boy. Now his dad, dead the same way, a dark thread tying them across decades. It felt like fate had marked them both, a curse I couldn't unsee. I stood there, the damp air clinging to me, wondering if some people are just doomed from the start. Those little markers stayed with me, their numbers burned into my head, a quiet horror louder than the rest of the cemetery. I was 15 when Jessica Lane vanished from my town of Easton, Ohio. She was the kind of girl everyone noticed. Top grades, cheerleader, always smiling, until she hit her teens. Something shifted. She got wild, reckless, like she didn't care anymore. She quit cheerleading, stopped hanging out with her old friends, and let her grades crash. Her parents pointed the finger at her boyfriend, Matt Carver, an 18-year-old from across town with a rough edge. He dragged her into drinking and smoking, stuff she'd never touched before. I'd see them sometimes, stumbling out of dive bars or rocking out at late-night shows, her eyes glassy and distant. She'd come home later each time, drunker, until she couldn't even get up for school. Her folks tried everything, grounding her, talking it out, but nothing stuck. On the 4th of March, 1991, they forced her into a home for troubled girls. I could tell she hated it from the second she walked in. One freezing March night, word spread that she'd slipped out of that place, grabbing just a small bag of stuff. Her parents were livid, tearing into the staff for letting her escape, and they filed a missing persons report with the Easton police. Everyone figured she'd run to Matt, but when the cops checked his place, he hadn't even known she was gone. 2 days later, I heard the news that stopped me cold. They'd found her body behind Grace Hill Cemetery, 20 miles from the home. She'd been stripped bare, beaten until her skin was a map of bruises, left sprawled near the fence. Her ring was still on her finger, but that pendant she always wore, the one engraved with "Taken," was missing. Matt got hauled in, but DNA cleared him. The cops pieced it together. She'd tried hitching a ride back to town, maybe turned down some guys who stopped for her. She bolted into the cemetery, ducking behind tombstones. I saw her sock later, caked in mud, proof she'd been hiding. But they caught her, smashed her skull with a jagged chunk of tombstone, and left the bloody pieces by the fence. Years dragged on, and then, on the 9th of April 2008, cops in North Carolina grabbed Marvin Lee Jones. DNA nailed him for Jessica's murder. He spilled it all in court. She jumped from his car, ran into the cemetery, and slammed into a fence post. He chased her down, grabbed that tombstone, and beat her until she stopped moving. He tossed it over the fence after. He took a plea, 30 years to life, dodging a death penalty trial set for March 2009. I still see her sometimes in my head, running through that graveyard, heart pounding, knowing what's coming. Death found her in a place already thick with it, and that irony cuts deeper than the rest. I work at Mount View Cemetery in Hong Kong, a massive, overcrowded burial ground carved into a mountainside since 1882. It's all terraced steps and winding staircases, like some eerie outdoor theater stacked with the dead. I've lived here my whole life, but the place still feels huge, almost alive in its stillness. My story kicks off right before Qingming, our tomb-sweeping festival on the 3rd of April. Families flood in to clean their ancestors' graves, a show of respect, sure, but also a flex. Some plots go for over $30,000, so we've got to spruce things up beforehand. Last April, I drew the short straw, moving remains to new sites to free up space for the big spenders. I'd never done it before, and I was dreading it. It's not just the cultural taboo. Disturbing the dead feels wrong. It's the grind. Hours in sticky heat, hauling bones up hundreds of steps, suited up in masks, goggles, and a forensic getup, making sure not one speck of dust gets lost. I started early one morning, cracking the seal on an old grave. The family had sold it to someone richer, probably to pocket the cash or fix up another spot. The headstone was so weathered I couldn't make out the name, just faint scratches where letters used to be. It took 8 hours to break it open, keeping every slab intact. The next day I went deeper, splitting the rotted coffin and bagging the bones. Each piece I pulled out hit me hard. Ribs, fingers, a skull with hollow sockets. It was like dismantling a person, seeing them reduced to scraps. I've been around death 5 days a week, but this was different. Usually, I mow lawns, sweep paths, stuff that keeps my mind off the big picture. But staring at those remains, I couldn't escape it. I felt small, temporary, like my own bones would end up like that someday. I don't buy into ghosts or spirits. There's always a rational answer. But what happened next still rattles me. That night, I started dreaming of a woman. She was tall, striking, dressed in old-school Chinese robes, not the Western clothes kids like me wear. She'd walk up to me in the cemetery, saying she was visiting her family's graves. It was so vivid I woke up whispering her name, Leon K. The dreams kept coming, sticking with me all day. Her face burned into my head. I tried brushing it off. Stress, maybe. But then we got to restoring the grave's engraving. We had to dig through old handwritten records, thick, dusty books from some vault. When I found the name of the person I'd moved, Li Yanfeng, my heart sank. The family name Li and middle name Yan matched my dream girls. It wasn't K, thank God, but it was too close. My hands shook as I read it, the coincidence clawing at me. The dreams faded once the remains were settled and the grave sealed, but I can't shake the chill. I tell myself it was just my brain processing the job, but deep down, I wonder if something lingered in those bones. I used to be a funeral director in a rural corner called Havenwood, tied to a cemetery older than anyone could pin down. Hundreds of years at least. The church next door dates back to the 17th century, so the graves must too. Back then, they buried folks with wooden crosses that rotted away, and new bodies just kept piling in. Now, with hardly anyone living out here, the place is a mess, overgrown, falling apart, but still kind of beautiful in its decay. The soil's been churned so many times it's more bone than dirt. I'd rake a flower bed and pull up teeth, bits of finger bone, even a jaw once. It's not like beach sand. It's human fragments, white and jagged. You get used to it after a while, tucking anything recognizable back under the plants with a quiet respect. One day, someone was fixing up their relative's grave, clearing grass to make a tidy Zen garden with raked lines. They yanked up a tangle of snow-white hair from the dirt, long, stringy like it had just been waiting there. They freaked and ran, leaving it for the attendant to find. She reported it to the church, and they buried it deeper. I've seen a lot as an undertaker, but I still don't get how a body ended up that close to the surface after centuries. That wasn't the worst, though. My partner and I had just picked up a 27-year-old woman who'd lost her fight with cancer. We were shifting her from the cot to the embalming table when a sharp click cut through the room. The old radio across the way, one of those dial-turn jobs, blared static at full blast. Neither of us had gone near it. My partner, a deeply religious guy, went white as a sheet, his hands trembling. He mumbled some excuse and bailed early. I shut the thing off, sticking to my phone for music while I worked, trying to shake the unease. I finished the embalming hours later, moving her to the dressing table. Then it happened again, that same click, and the radio roared back to life, static screaming through the silence. I was alone this time, the sound bouncing off the walls, loud enough to rattle my teeth. My pulse spiked, and I couldn't stay. I locked up fast, the noise still echoing in my head as I bolted out. We never talked about it after. My partner wouldn't even look at me the next day, and it never happened again. But that click, that static, it's lodged in me, a cold little splinter I can't pull out. I spend a lot of time in the old cemetery in my town of Ashford. It's ancient, layered with history, and sometimes I'd rather be there with the dead than deal with the living. The place has its quirks, but one spot always gets me. A small section off to the side, filled with graves marked only by 3-digit numbers. I've counted them going past 300, some with tiny flags for veterans, but no names, no dates. Just cold, blank numbers etched into stone. It's haunting, thinking those people are lost forever, swallowed by time. Nearby, there's a lone grave in Greek. No number, but a full name, birth and death dates, and a birthplace. Leucadia, Greece. I translated it once with my phone. Another Greek grave across the cemetery shares the same last name and hometown, but the birth years jump from 1900 to 1983. The death date's identical for all. Hundreds gone on the same day. I've scoured the internet, but there's no trace of what happened. In a newer part, one grave stands out, covered in post-it notes from a widow. Some days, there are hundreds, stuck all over the headstone, scribbled with shaky words. It's like she's having an endless broken chat with her husband. Or maybe a brother, I can't tell. I'll never know who she is, but it sticks with me. That raw, quiet desperation. I've felt things there too, though I don't buy into ghosts. I'm agnostic, open to mysteries, not some big bearded god up top. More than once I've been studying a tombstone's carved details when a bird swoops down, landing right on it, staring at me. I've seen cats pawing at empty air, eyes locked on something I can't see. There's a logical answer, sure, but when I'm alone among those graves, my mind runs wild, and the stillness turns heavy. I'll never forget the night my dad died. I was 22, deputy manager at a bar in my hometown of Crestwood, about to head out for my shift. I was finishing an episode of some mob show, half watching, when my phone buzzed. I figured it was work nagging me to come in early, so I let it ring, picking it up with a lazy grunt. I wasn't ready for what hit me. My dad was gone. A blood clot in his brain, sudden and final. 1 minute he was fine, the next he was dead on arrival. The funeral was a blur, brutal in a way I hadn't expected. When someone's old or sick, you get time to brace yourself, but this, it was like a sucker punch, 0 to grief in seconds flat. Everyone there looked shell-shocked, wandering around like we couldn't process it. I've never been big on graves. It's harsh, but I don't see the point. Visiting's just for the living, not the dead. I'd rather someone crack a beer in my memory than stand over my stone feeling mortal. But with Dad, I had no closure, no way to let go. So I started going against everything I believed, dragging myself to his plot in Crestwood Cemetery. Weekly trips turned monthly, always the same. I'd crack open a can of his favorite lager, sit by his headstone, and talk about my life. It didn't fix much, but each time I walked away, the weight lightened just a fraction, like tiny steps through the mess in my head. It went on like that until one day I saw him, a man I didn't know, standing near Dad's grave. He was dressed head to toe in black, a long coat swaying in the breeze, a dark umbrella tucked under his arm. I couldn't tell if he was there for Dad or a nearby plot, but as I got closer, he spotted me. He turned quick and headed for an exit, his steps sharp. I didn't think much of it. People grieve alone, I get it. But then it happened again. Same guy, same spot. I chalked it up to chance the second time, but by the third, I knew something was off. That third time, I crept up quieter, staying low behind the stones, watching. He knelt by Dad's grave, touched the headstone for a moment. I didn't recognize him from the funeral, and his face was shadowed, but he wasn't anyone I knew. I had to know who he was. I kept my distance, moving silent, heart thudding as I closed in. But when I got near, he turned, saw me, and his eyes went wide with shock. Then he ran, full on sprinting through the graves toward an exit. I didn't think, just chased him, yelling for him to stop, saying I just wanted to talk. People stared, horrified at me tearing through their sacred ground. But I didn't care. I caught him by the arm near the gate, yanked hard, and he spun around. When I saw his face, my gut dropped. It was Dad's face, every line, every feature, identical. But the way he moved, the set of his shoulders, it wasn't him. He spoke, and my head spun harder. Dad had a thick Southern English drawl, but this guy's voice was Scottish, clipped and rough. "Leave me alone," he snapped, then bolted again. My legs gave out, not just from the run. I couldn't follow. I sat there, shaking, until I could think straight. I talked to Mom later, and we landed on one wild guess. He had to be Dad's twin. She'd ID'd his body at the morgue, no faking that, but Dad never once mentioned a brother, let alone a double. We're digging into it now, because if he's family, I need to find him. That face in the cemetery, it's haunting me, a ghost I can't bury.